Hillbilly. One of the most unique killers in Dead by Daylight while being conceptually simple, he's one of the hardest killers in the game to master. My name is Hens and I've played Hillbilly for years and he's my most played killer, investing thousands of hours into learning how to use and master his power. And today I'll teach you everything you could possibly learn about Billy. I personally love challenges and killers that challenge me where I can always learn and improve, and that's exactly what Hillbilly is all about. But first I want to teach you all the basics about the killer. Hillbilly is the son of the Thompsons, who are wealthy landowners who hated him and shut him away because he wasn't as perfect as they wanted him to be, shutting him away in a small room in the cowshed until he escaped one day and tormented everything on the farm ever since. And this is when the entity took him into Dead by Daylight. In Dead by Daylight, Hillbilly is a killer with a relatively simple kit. He has normal movement speed and a large 40-meter tear radius. What makes him special is his chainsaw. After a few seconds of revving, Hillbilly can start the chainsaw sprint, which allows him to one-shot any survivors caught in his path and travel across the map in seconds. Billy can also enter a special mode. Using the chainsaw in any way makes the overdrive meter go up. Not using the chainsaw for more than 8 seconds makes the overdrive meter decay. Once the meter fills up, overdrive starts. When overdrive starts, he becomes blue. In this mode, Billy has a decreased charge time, increased chainsaw speed, and less cooldown. At the start of the chainsaw, Hillbilly has a 1-second window in which his turning is significantly increased, allowing him to do what most veterans love about him the most. Carving is the act of using that initial window to carve around objects to use it as an anti-loop tool and one-shot survivors. But before we go deeper into carving, I think it is very important to understand how the chainsaw functions on a code level and why mouse and keyboard is not really the advantage you think it is on this killer. No matter how much you pull your analog stick or mouse to the side, Hillbilly will turn the same amount during the chainsaw sprint. This is because for the sake of turning, the game converts your inputs into ones and zeros. Either you turn in that direction or not. Making controlled inputs is always better than trying to flick your mouse across your desk, because there's simply no difference on what it does. Since the chainsaw steering works exactly like keyboard inputs, binding turning keys in your settings and turning with Q and E can be a great starting point to get a good feeling for the chainsaw. There is also a hidden mechanic about the initial turning that is very crucial to know about. The moment you start your chainsaw sprint, the game checks if you're turning in either direction on the frame you start the sprint. And if you are, you will automatically turn 80 degrees in that direction. This hidden mechanic is what makes Hillbilly able to do 180 turns, but can also catch newcomers off guard very hard by making them steer into walls. Now that we got the nerd stuff out of the way, how do we actually use the chainsaw to down survivors? Before we start a chainsaw sprint, there's a 2.5 second charge time at base in which we move slower than survivors. Keep in mind, even if you're relatively close to a survivor, you will lose more distance by the time you're ready to start the sprint. There are also a few factors that can make the chainsaw charge slower or faster, but we will ignore those for now. Keeping an eye on the survivor while controlling the charge can be really tricky. I recommend looking at the bar and tapping the charge to keep it steady around the 80 to 90%, and then fully focus on the survivor once you're ready to commit to the chainsaw. Even hitting survivors up close can be tricky at first. Learning to find the rhythm to keep the chainsaw at a high percentage without releasing makes it a lot easier. This is generally referred to as 99ing or feathering the saw, and the best Billy players keep the bar at 95% at all times. Keep in mind there are add-ons in Overdrive that changes how fast you have to tap by increasing or decreasing the charge time, which is one of the hardest things about this character. So many different things can throw off your muscle memory. I would recommend looking down before releasing the chainsaw to have a good idea of the collision around you and have an easier time controlling the initial turn window. This is also crucial when survivors are close to you to not lose track if they try to run into you. This is by far the most common way survivors will try to outplay you up close. Now that we know the basics of how to control the chainsaw, what are the fancy ways of using it? The bread and butter of Billy, what makes all the veterans excited, is carving. Carving is the art of using the increased turning at the start of the chainsaw sprint to outplay structures and loops to down survivors in style. Proper technique and timing is crucial here, but if mastered, it is what makes Billy a top tier killer. To do it properly, it is important to be aware of the Billy turning circle, as it dictates what is possible and what isn't. Billy's turning circle in overdrive is a lot wider. This can be a significant advantage at big loops like the cow tree, while being really annoying on shorter filler pallets where you can't properly wrap around it anymore. Keep in mind the pre-turning that we talked about earlier. This can allow you to make steep curves up to 180 degrees on loops. Especially with overdrive, almost every pallet in the game can be outplayed, given the sheer speed of Billy. Curving requires precision on inputs and good timing, but don't forget that the survivor can also see you setting it up. A lot of veterans have played against Billy for years, and they will probably try to dodge either by tucking in a corner or stop hugging the loop, which adds another layer of complexity to curving. Try to get a feeling for how the survivor wants to play and if they keep repeating the same moves or not. Most of them fall into patterns you can read and exploit. It is also important, however, that you yourself stay unpredictable. There are a lot of different ways to curve on Billy. Sticking to only one way makes you incredibly easy to read and you will have a hard time getting results. The 90-degree curve is the most simple and the bread and butter of Billy. This is what you should mainly practice as a base, just starting the chainsaw looking straight and then turning the mouse right after the chainsaw starts. The 180 degrees is a combination of turning one way right as the chainsaw starts and then also turning further into the same direction, allowing Billy to curve around walls very effectively. If this gets combined with a 180 turn to surprise survivors right as we start the chainsaw sprint, we have a 30-60. Can be hard to execute at times and definitely not easy, but if done well, it can easily make survivors misstep and curves a lot easier. One of my favorite ways to curve is the S-curve, which is the act of using the initial turning mechanic to go one way and then move the mouse the other directly afterwards. This can be really nice to circumvent collision or fake survivors out who are hiding behind an object. Keep in mind, Billy is excellent at zoning survivors. Going for fancy curves might look cool, but oftentimes it's not the most effective move. He can break pallets and breakable walls in 1 second, which is actually the fastest possible cooldown for his chainsaw. If a survivor stuck behind a pallet, it's oftentimes smarter to deplete the resource, since they will have a hard time making another pallet or window. Lots of tools to be used, but when do we use them effectively? The first thing I have to say here is do not be afraid to use your basic attack. If the survivor is close to a window or pallet, you won't be able to rev your chainsaw on time. Given the long charge time, predicting a survivor's pathing is crucial here. Sometimes just holding the chainsaw and seeing how the survivor reacts can also be a great idea. If you want to use your chainsaw, do not be afraid to run into pallets. A lot of survivors will expect you to respect the pallet, and because of your slow movement speed while charging, you will not make the distance up anymore. On pallets that are curvable, you want to take pallet control whenever possible. Smart survivors will know this, however, and not give the pallet up. Dropping them can be really risky for them, however, as they can get stuck in the animation, and if you're on the side of the pallet, we can take advantage of this and chainsaw them. And don't forget, even if they manage to drop the pallet, with overdrive you can outplay almost anything. Farming overdrive is the matter on Billy. Being stuck in long chases without overdrive is how you lose. You do not have to commit every chase you get. If you're not close to overdrive and the survivor is a good setup, it might be a lot better to go across the map and chase someone else with a now full overdrive bar. This is also why it's a very good idea to go across the map after hooking survivors, even if there's a survivor nearby to chase. Starting a fresh chase right next to it with no overdrive bar means you will need multiple chainsaws until you reach it. Chainsawing survivors who are close to drop pallets can be rather frustrating. The hitbox of the pallet is a lot bigger than the survivor hitbox you're trying to hit. The easiest way to outplay this is to chainsaw at an angle that is too steep to break the pallet. On a lot of filler pallets and tiles, there are parts of the loop that are way easier for you to land a chainsaw on. You always want to attack on the longer, flatter side, since it gives less chance for the survivor to dodge. Keep in mind, once a survivor is stuck at a loop, they will always react to your movement. Maneuver them in the perfect spot before going in for the kill. If you start a chainsaw sprint while dropping off elevation, you can turn while not actually affecting your trajectory until you land, allowing for some cool curves most survivors will never see coming. Especially with overdrive, it is very possible to outplay every single long wall tile in the game. Keep in mind, when charging your chainsaw, survivors will roughly know where you are thanks to the chainsaw sound, but it is not very precise and it's still very easy to mind game some meters. If you have survivors stuck at a short loop, be patient on your chainsaw and try to bait the drop. Once they enter the pallet vaulting animation, they can't dodge anymore and it's an easy kill. And with overdrive active, this works on almost any pallet in the game. Billy's chainsaw has no hitbox below his waist. This is an advantage in some cases if you know what you're doing, and a huge disadvantage in others. On one hand, we can slide on a lot of loops on different maps. This definitely needs some map knowledge, but these cars on Batham are a great example, where it is fairly obvious that both ends won't have collision. Look out for objects that are below waist level or have a cone shape with a wider bottom. More often than not, you can actually slide these objects. They're a resource for you that allow you to outplay survivors more consistently and travel the map with ease. On the other hand, crouching survivors are incredibly hard to hit. They are only chainsawable by being dead on in the middle of them. And if they're on a lower elevation level, they're straight up unhittable. This means chainsawing survivors down a set of stairs relies on them not knowing crouching makes them invincible. Be very careful playing around different elevation levels. Billy's chainsaw has a different hitbox for environment. This hitbox is a little bit smaller than the ones to detect player hits. The smaller hitbox allows him to lean into objects and be able to navigate tight spaces way better than you might think he does. You can also clip objects and pass by them without colliding them. Together with the ability to slide small objects, this can give Billy surprisingly good mobility on a lot of maps, especially indoors. There are three kinds of collisions on walls in DBD for Billy's chainsaw: sticky, leanable, and slidable surfaces. Sticky are often rough surfaces. Leaning into them at all will cause a bump. More often than not, these are surfaces that don't look very smooth, like a bush or a hedge. And slidable surfaces, which support a neat lean into them, which can be extremely useful to surprise survivors with chainsaws on tricky angles, and these are mostly flat looking walls. And the third category are the slidable objects we just talked about. What category something falls into oftentimes is logical by looking at it, but there are exceptions. Listing every object here would not be feasible, and also some of them tend to change from patch to patch. It also has to be said, there are obstructions above your head which can block your chainsaw while allowing you to walk through. Best example is this fence on Batham. What a wonderful map. Let's now talk about the parks you want to run on Hillbilly. He has great synergy with a lot of park archetypes. However, information and slowdown parks stand out to be the best, with some chase parks being worth equipping for beginners. Information parks that reveal survivors far away can really help you to reach your overdrive faster, which makes closing out chases fast incredibly easy. This makes parks like Lethal Pursuit and Barbecue and Chili work especially well with his power. His large terror radius also makes Infectious Fright especially worth it, since he excels at snowballing in overdrive and can down multiple survivors fast in no time. Infectious is also a really good combination with some hex perks, since it still gets rid of all the cleanse progress once the survivor screams. In combination with Thrill of the Hunt, this can make totem builds completely unbearable for survivors. This also works incredibly well with hex perks like Ruin, Crowd Control, or Hive Mind. Slowdowns are never bad on any killer, but especially on Billy, it can help compound his huge amounts of pressure. Corrupt Intervention can force survivors to move out in the open space into you and help you if you have a bad start. Pain Resonance is overall the greatest regression perk to help you interrupt gens and apply other slowdowns. Turn Back the Clock allows the regression of generators while still being able to focus on chasing the survivors that were just repairing them. And Pop Eruption are solid choices if you want more slowdown and play with the gen control build in mind. One perk that has special synergy with his power is Agitation, since overheat dissipates when not using the chainsaw for more than 8 seconds. Being fast on hook can be crucial to preserve that build-up overdrive meter, making Agitation a great choice to add more lethality on top of saving time hooking. There are some chase perks that that you can consider running on Billy, especially as a beginner. Bamboozle was once the perk of choice for Billy, but now it's not really worth it anymore if you're an expert. But still, a great beginner perk if you want to start learning how to outplay tiles like jungle gyms or shack. Getting rid of that window can make it a lot easier and more linear for you to outplay it, but if you're good at it, you don't really need it. Another underrated chase perk on Billy is Enduring. Respecting every pallet is impossible on Billy, and Enduring can really make it a lot less punishing to run into pallets, making it another excellent beginner perk when learning how to outplay tiles and pallets. Forced Hesitation is an excellent snowball perk on Billy, making a singular down turn into a huge snowball moment, making it one of the greatest perks to run overall. As a starting point on Billy to get a good build going, I would recommend 1 or 2 information perks, a chase perk if you're a beginner, and 1 or 2 slowdown perks. This is the golden ratio for a perfect perk build on Billy in my opinion. In terms of add-ons, Billy has a few choices, but realistically, to be at its strongest, Billy needs the Iridescent Engravings add-on. There's a reason almost every Billy main pretty much exclusively plays with this add-on. The added speed raises Billy's lethality to be one of the strongest killers in the game and allows carving outside of overdrive to be much stronger. Without this add-on, Billy heavily relies on overdrive in order to carve and outplay bigger tiles. Otherwise, he has to play heavier into zoning and pallet breaking aspect, as the lack of speed makes his chainsaw a lot more dodgeable. But don't get it twisted, even without engravings, Billy is clearly an above average killer that can win almost any match and has more fun add-ons available to use. His second best type of add-on are definitely the boots add-ons. Spiked and Dad's boots raises turning outside of the initial turning window while chainsaw sprinting. This makes it a lot easier to avoid obstacles and traverse the map, meaning less time spent traveling and faster overdrive generation overall, which translates into more lethality. They also make sniping survivors with a chainsaw feasible, as you can react to their movement to a certain degree. And of course, the extra turning can help on longer loops when carving. The other add-ons are significantly worse. The cooldown add-ons don't work in overdrive anymore, making them fairly situational. Low pro chains allows you to go through pallets, but keep in mind your chainsaw cooldown is significantly longer, even with the ability to reposition. Since you can't down survivors anymore with low pro chains, this add-on is sadly not worth that much anymore, since the added cooldown makes zoning a lot worse. The one other add-on worth mentioning here is Apex Muffler, which makes your chainsaw completely silent when survivors are outside of your terror radius. An incredible add-on in combination with undetectable perks in order to jump scare survivors. For beginners, knockback chains can be interesting to reduce the penalty for bumping on certain terrain, but even then, there are better options. I would stay away from the overdrive add-ons, they're not worth running, and the rest of the add-ons are sadly lackluster. Billy also has 2 tags which are essential, and every serious Billy player should know about them. The first one is incredibly useful for looping situations. While cooling down your chainsaw, Billy has no inertia, also known as momentum, at all, meaning mind gaming distance at the very end is incredibly easy with a swift momentum turn. This can help tremendously, making the survivor lose some distance for free. The other tag is the cancel tag. Billy can still destroy pallets and hit survivors in cooldown, which can sometimes be extremely useful, especially if directly chainsawing into a survivor who is camping a pallet. It's not that hard for them to time the pallet drop to stun Billy out of the sprint, and if we end the chainsaw right before the pallet, we will break it after they drop it. Meaning instead of getting stunned, we break the pallet instantly and can follow up with another chainsaw. It is also possible to break pallets at a steeper angle than usually by cancelling the chainsaw and aiming the camera into it. Sometimes it's also possible to hit crouching survivors by ending the chainsaw right next to them and aiming into them. Another very useful Hillbilly tag is the low pro flick. When breaking a pallet or breakable wall with low pro chains, there's 1 frame of free turning. If you move your mouse enough, you can actually turn freely in any direction you want, which can allow for some crazy hits. It is also possible to cancel tag with low pro and to continue the chainsaw afterwards, which makes the chainsaw animation very buggy and can easily catch survivors off guard. One of the most tricky parts about playing Hillbilly is adjusting to the map. The chainsaw is a great tool, but there's always situations where it's way less useful because of its turning restrictions and the map environment. As a general rule of thumb, you want to travel the map and take chases in positions that are favorable for you. Using the initial surprise factor is crucial. You almost always want to take chases away from buildings as they restrict your mobility too much. On indoor maps like Hawkins or Larry's, use the long straight lines on the edges to go up or down the map. On on Hawkins if you ever catch a survivor in the glass room and they don't immediately leave, they're caught in a death trap. The mid-air momentum trick we talked about earlier is incredibly useful here to make the catwalks a complete death trap. You might think launching yourself off heights would be a great idea to surprise survivors on a lot of maps, but sadly there are invisible collision boxes everywhere, which stops almost all of the fun. Learning these is also kind of crucial to maximize the effectiveness of Goomba stomping survivors with the chainsaw. I also want to quickly talk about how you can outplay certain tiles with your chainsaw that might not be crazy obvious. Making a complete guide here is close to impossible because this is a lot about reacting to the survivor and adjusting your gameplay, but I want to give you some pointers to help. The hardest tile to play properly in my opinion are the two window tiles. These can waste a lot of your time, but playing it smartly can easily down survivors there. In Overdrive, these tiles are not safe at all for the survivors. The chainsaw can be used in multiple ways and survivors do not have enough time to play check spots anymore, meaning you can catch them off guard like this quite easily. I personally like outplaying the T of the TL wall with Overdrive, and if I don't have Overdrive, I zone the survivor to the L and then play the 50-50 whether they vault the window or not. Shack is another very intricate tile. When arriving on the pallet side, it is very easy to zone the survivor after breaking the pallet, which is why I wouldn't advise to actually take them on and rather threaten the one-shot with the chainsaw. After the survivor drops the pallet, they have to play the window on the short side, which can be an easy down for you. On the long side with Overdrive, the window is not safe at all, but survivors can go wide or crouch after vaulting the window, making it a very hard chainsaw to land overall, which is why I would advise you to block the window with your body and then threaten another chainsaw afterwards. Long wall window tiles can be fairly easy to outplay with Overdrive. If the survivor missteps a tiny bit, they will not make it back to the window anymore, making it a bit of a death trap if curved well. Another tile that is incredibly easy to play, as we said earlier, is the cow tree. The cow tree is every hillbilly's main favorite tile because of how easy it is to curve, even with no engravings. If a survivor gets stuck here, you do have a free kill in almost any situation. So take advantage of it because you can slide the window side. And this is everything I have to teach you about the character Hillbilly in Dead by Daylight. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and I'll see you next time.